We're Tom and Kate, a married couple in our 50s who traded the corporate life for something far more thrilling. For years, we worked steady jobs at a bank, following the routine day in and day out. But everything changed after one chilling experience inside that very same bank, an experience we still can't fully explain. That was the moment we realized there's a world beyond what we can see, a world of shadows, echoes, and lingering souls caught between time. It called to us, and we couldn't ignore it. So, we packed our bags, hopped on our old motorcycle, and hit the road. Our mission? To explore the mysteries hidden in forgotten places, uncover the truth behind ghost stories, and face the unknown head-on. Each stop on this journey reveals something new, something strange, and something haunting. Some experiences chill us to the bone. Others leave us questioning everything we thought we knew. It all started with the haunted bank, the very place we worked for years without realizing the secrets it held. What happened there changed our lives forever. The Haunted Bank. Our first encounter with the unseen. My name is Tom Walker, and I'm 52 years old. My wife, Kate, and I worked at Dunwich City Bank for nearly 30 years. It's a modest little bank in a quiet New England town. The kind of place where nothing much happens, or at least, that's what we thought. Looking back, I realize now that the bank had always felt a bit off. I couldn't quite explain it at the time, but there was something about the basement that never sat right with me. The building itself was old, dating back to the late 19th century. The ground floor was where we handled daily transactions. The top floor housed the management offices. And the basement, well, it was originally a bomb shelter during World War II. Now, it served as a storage area for old records and unused office equipment. Most of our colleagues hated going down there. It was dark, cold, and always felt a little too quiet. That fateful night, Kate and I stayed late to complete the year-end audit. The streets outside were eerily silent, with only the occasional gust of wind rattling the windows. The clock on the wall read 10:30 p.m. I remember glancing at it, thinking how tired I was, and wishing we could wrap things up quickly. "Tom, do you think we'll finish soon?" Kate asked, looking up from her stack of documents. I adjusted my glasses and offered her a reassuring smile. "We'll be done before midnight. Trust me." But as soon as I said those words, the wall clock stopped at exactly 11:11 p.m. Its second hand froze in place. "Huh, that's strange," I muttered, before I could give it much thought. The sound of footsteps echoed from the basement below. They were slow at first, deliberate, as if someone were pacing back and forth. Kate raised an eyebrow. "Tom, did you hear that?" "Probably just the pipes," I said, trying to sound confident. Old buildings make all sorts of noises. But the footsteps grew louder, heavier, and stopped abruptly at the base of the basement stairs. My stomach tightened. I could feel Kate's eyes on me, waiting for an explanation I couldn't give. "I'll go check it out," I said, grabbing the flashlight from my desk. The staircase creaked beneath my feet as I descended. The air grew colder with each step, and by the time I reached the bottom, it felt like I had walked into a refrigerator. A musty smell hung in the air, mingling with the scent of old paper and damp concrete. The basement was vast, filled with rows of wooden filing cabinets and metal shelves. My flashlight flickered as I swept the beam across the room. Just as it passed over the far corner, I saw something move. It was quick, a shadow darting out of sight. "Hello?" I called out, my voice echoing back at me. Silence. Then came the faint sound of whispering. Kate called from the top of the stairs. "Tom, what's going on down there?" Before I could answer, the overhead lights flickered and went out, plunging the basement into darkness. "Tom!" Kate rushed down the stairs, her footsteps hurried and frantic. "Stay close," I said, gripping her hand tightly. For a moment, we stood there in the dark, listening. The whispering stopped, replaced by the sound of something metallic scraping across the floor. "Tom, we need to leave," Kate whispered. I nodded. "Let's go." We turned to head back up the stairs. But just as we reached the top, the basement door slammed shut in front of us. Kate grabbed the handle and yanked on it, but it wouldn't budge. "Not again," she whispered. "Tom, it's locked." I fumbled for the key in my pocket, my hands trembling. The whispering grew louder behind us, almost frantic now. Finally, the lock clicked, and the door swung open. We stumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. The next morning, we reported the incident to the bank's management. They checked the basement, but everything was in its place. No scattered papers, no open filing cabinets, nothing to suggest anything unusual had happened. For a while, we tried to convince ourselves that it had all been a bad dream. But the strange occurrences continued. Lights flickered without reason, doors creaked open and closed on their own, and I often felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck, even when the windows were shut tight. Then Kate started having the nightmares. In the dream, I'm standing at the top of the stairs, looking down into the basement. Kate told me one morning. Her face was pale, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. "It's pitch black down there, but I can feel something watching me." Then the door slams shut, and I'm trapped. She paused, her voice trembling. I hear whispers. They call my name. A chill ran down my spine. And when I turn around, she continued, "There's nothing there, just darkness." I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that her dreams were more than just dreams. Determined to get to the bottom of things, I started digging into the history of the bank. I spent hours at the town library, combing through old records. Eventually, I found an old newspaper article from 1947. "Local banker disappears without a trace." The headline read, according to the article, a man named Henry Whitaker, the bank manager, had vanished one night while working late. His car was still parked outside, and his personal belongings were found on his desk. But no one ever saw him again. The last place anyone had seen him was in the basement. Armed with this new information, Kate and I decided to confront whatever was in the basement once and for all. The air was even heavier than before as we descended the stairs. The lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Then came the whispering again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. "Do you hear that?" Kate whispered, clutching my arm. I nodded, my eyes scanning the room. The whispering grew louder, and the filing cabinets began to shake. Papers flew into the air, swirling around us like a storm of forgotten memories. "Tom, we have to go," Kate shouted. We turned and ran toward the stairs, but the door slammed shut once again. "Hurry," Kate cried, her voice rising in panic. With trembling hands, I unlocked the door, and we burst out into the hallway. The next day, we handed in our resignation letters. We didn't bother explaining why. What could we say? That the bank was haunted? No one would have believed us anyway. A few weeks later, curiosity got the better of me. I returned to the bank one last time, determined to find the file with our names on it. But when I opened the filing cabinet, it was gone. It was as if it had never existed. That evening, as we sat on our porch, Kate broke the silence. "Tom, do you remember Sarah? She once told me about a house in Louisiana. She said it was cursed." I leaned back, considering her words. Maybe that's where we should go next. If there's any truth to her story, it might hold the answers we're looking for. The next morning, we packed our bags, climbed onto our motorcycle, and set off for Louisiana. The haunted bank was just the beginning. The cursed house in Louisiana. It all started with a story. My wife, Kate, remembered it after we had barely caught our breath from the terrifying events at the bank. We were sitting at the kitchen table one night, still processing everything that had happened, when she suddenly said, "Tom, do you remember my old friend Sarah?" I looked up from my coffee, curious. "Sarah? Yeah, I remember her. Why?" "She once told me about a house in Louisiana. Belle Reve. She said it was cursed." Kate explained, her voice soft but serious. "No family ever lasted more than a few months living there. They always left suddenly, without explanation. They abandoned everything and refused to talk about what drove them out." I sat back, considering her words. Normally, I would have shrugged off a story like that, but not after what we had been through. "What if it's connected?" I said. "What if it's the same kind of thing we saw at the bank? Something dark, something real." Kate's eyes lit up with determination. "There's only one way to find out." And just like that, we decided. We packed a few essentials, flashlights, warm clothes, and some basic camping supplies, and climbed onto our motorcycle, heading south. The road stretched out before us like an invitation to the unknown. The first few days were peaceful. The highway was open and quiet, the air growing warmer with each mile. By the time we crossed into Louisiana, the landscape had transformed. Tall trees surrounded us, their branches twisting into strange shapes, draped with thick curtains of Spanish moss. The smell of damp earth and cypress hung in the air, heavy and sweet. "It's beautiful," Kate said, watching the trees blur past. "But it feels different, like we've entered another world." We followed a series of winding back roads until we reached the small town of Belle Reve. The sun was setting by the time we found the house, casting the entire landscape in hues of deep orange and purple. Belle Reve stood at the end of a long, narrow dirt road, half hidden by the shadows of ancient oaks. "It looks exactly how Sarah described it," Kate whispered, her voice barely audible. The house was a crumbling Victorian mansion, its once grand exterior now weathered and worn. Vines crawled up its sides, wrapping around the columns like skeletal fingers. The windows were dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring out over the overgrown yard. "This place hasn't been touched in decades," I said, parking the bike. Kate climbed off behind me, her eyes scanning the house. "It's waiting for us," she said. The porch creaked beneath our feet as we approached the front door. The air grew colder, and the smell of mildew hit us like a wave. Before I could reach for the doorknob, the door swung open on its own, groaning on rusted hinges. "Welcome home," I muttered under my breath. The air inside was thick and heavy, carrying the scent of old wood, damp stone, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. I swept my flashlight across the hallway, revealing faded wallpaper and dusty furniture. The house felt frozen in time, like it had been waiting for someone to return. Kate moved cautiously beside me, her footsteps barely making a sound. "It's like a museum," she said. "Everything's still here." The living room was filled with relics from another time. A worn-out armchair, an old phonograph sitting on a table, and a cracked porcelain vase on the mantelpiece. Above the fireplace hung a portrait of a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. Their eyes seemed to follow us wherever we moved. "We should check the upstairs," I suggested. Kate nodded, and we made our way up the grand staircase. Each step groaned beneath our weight, the sound echoing through the silent house. We decided to set up camp in the living room for the night. I found some candles in a drawer and lit them, their flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. Kate sat beside me, her eyes scanning the room. "Do you feel it?" she asked softly. I nodded. The house felt alive, like it was watching us, waiting to see what we would do next. We ate a quiet dinner of sandwiches and bottled water, listening to the house creak and groan in the wind. Outside, the swamp seemed to hum with life, the distant croak of frogs, the buzz of cicadas, and the occasional rustle of leaves. Then, just after midnight, we heard it, a soft, rhythmic tapping. "Did you hear that?" Kate whispered, sitting up. I nodded, holding up a hand to silence her. The tapping grew louder, more deliberate, as if someone, or something, was knocking on the walls. "It's coming from the hallway," I said, grabbing my flashlight. We followed the sound, our footsteps soft on the worn carpet. The tapping stopped just as we reached the last door at the end of the hall. The door was scratched and gouged, as though someone had tried desperately to get in, or out. "Should we open it?" Kate asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. The air around the door was colder, and the smell of mildew was stronger here. Still, curiosity got the better of me. The lock gave way with a soft click, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the basement. A faint light flickered at the bottom of the stairs, casting strange shadows on the stone walls. "We have to see what's down there," I said. Kate nodded, though I could see the fear in her eyes. We descended into the darkness. The basement was larger than I had expected. Rough stone walls and a dirt floor made the space feel more like a cave than part of the house. Rusty tools hung from the beams overhead, their sharp edges catching the faint light. In the center of the room stood an old wooden table, its surface stained dark with something long dried. Then, a soft whisper filled the air. "Tom," Kate said, her voice trembling, "there's something behind you." I turned slowly, my flashlight sweeping across the room. A figure stood in the far corner, barely visible in the dim light. It was tall and thin, its face obscured by shadows. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The figure didn't move, it just stood there, watching us. Then it whispered, "Leave while you still can." Kate grabbed my arm. "Tom, we need to go." We bolted up the stairs, slamming the door shut behind us. We didn't sleep after that terrifying encounter in the basement. Kate and I sat on the floor in the living room, our backs against the wall, staring into the darkness beyond the flickering candlelight. Neither of us spoke for a long time, the weight of what we'd seen pressing down on us. "What was that thing?" Kate finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I said, running my hand through my hair. "But whatever it was, it didn't want us here." We debated leaving then and there, but something held us back, an unanswered question, a gnawing curiosity that wouldn't let us go. "There has to be more to this," Kate said, glancing at the journal she'd found earlier. "Something bigger than just one strange encounter. The journal mentions a family disappearing. Maybe if we can figure out what happened to them, we'll understand what's haunting this house." Reluctantly, I agreed. We would stay another day, just long enough to gather more information. The next morning, we decided to split up to cover more ground. Kate stayed upstairs, searching through the rest of the journal and old newspapers she had found, while I returned to the basement. Every fiber of my being told me not to go back down there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the answer was hiding in the shadows below. The air was colder than before, and the smell of damp earth and rusted metal was almost overwhelming. The wooden table still stood at the center of the room, its surface worn and stained. I walked around it, running my fingers over the rough wood. Then I saw it, a symbol carved into the tabletop, jagged and crude, almost like a warning. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, tracing the lines with my fingertips. It looked ancient, almost ritualistic, but I couldn't place it. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I felt a breath of cold air against the back of my neck. "Tom," a voice whispered from the shadows. I spun around, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Nothing. My pulse quickened. Whatever was down here was playing with me. When I returned upstairs, Kate was waiting for me, clutching a bundle of old photographs and yellowed newspaper clippings. "You won't believe what I found," she said, her face pale. She handed me a photograph. It showed a family standing in front of Belle Rev, a man, a woman, and 2 young children. They looked happy, but something about their eyes unsettled me. These are the Holloways, Kate explained. They lived here in the early 1900s. According to the journal, they disappeared without a trace. No one ever found out what happened to them. I flipped to the next photograph. It was taken in the same spot, but the family was gone. Only the house remained, its windows dark and empty. There's something else, Kate said, unfolding a faded newspaper clipping. A neighbor claimed to have seen the family wandering the grounds after they disappeared, years later. But when he approached them, they vanished into thin air. A chill settled over me. Ghosts? I asked. Kate nodded. Or something worse. We debated leaving, but curiosity won out once again. We decided to stay one more night, determined to uncover the truth. This time, we barricaded ourselves in one of the upstairs bedrooms, pushing an old dresser in front of the door. The room was cold despite the warm air outside, and the single candle we lit barely cut through the darkness. For hours, we sat in silence, listening to the house breathe around us. Every creak, every groan set my nerves on edge. Then, just after midnight, the knocking began again. It started softly at first, a rhythmic tapping that seemed to move along the walls. "Tom," Kate whispered, clutching my arm. "It's coming closer." Suddenly, the dresser slid aside on its own, the heavy wood scraping against the floor. The door swung open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. And there they were, the Holloway family. They stood in the hallway, their eyes hollow, their faces pale. "Elijah," I whispered, recognizing the man from the photograph. He turned to face me, his expression blank. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice echoing as if spoken from deep within a well. Kate grabbed my arm. "We need to go, now." But before we could move, the walls began to bleed darkness, thick shadows oozing out and creeping toward us like a living thing. We ran down the stairs, the sound of our footsteps drowned out by a deafening roar. The house was alive, its walls bending and twisting, the floor cracking beneath our feet. Every door we tried led us back to the same room, a looping nightmare that seemed to have no end. "The basement," Kate shouted. "We have to destroy the symbol." It was a gamble, but it was the only chance we had. We made our way back to the basement, dodging falling beams and slamming doors. The air was thick with smoke and shadow, choking us as we stumbled toward the table. The symbol carved into the wood pulsed with a sickly red light. "Almost alive. This has to be the source," I said, raising the iron poker I had grabbed along the way. "Let's end this." I brought the poker down on the table with all my strength. The symbol shattered, and the room exploded in a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, we found ourselves lying on the lawn outside. The house stood silently behind us, its windows dark and lifeless once more. Kate sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think so," I said, though I wasn't entirely sure. We stared at the house for a long time, neither of us speaking. It looked so ordinary now, so peaceful, but we knew better. Belle Reve was anything but ordinary. "We should go," Kate said finally. I nodded. We climbed back onto the motorcycle and rode away, leaving the house and its dark secrets behind us. But as we reached the edge of town, I couldn't shake the feeling that Belle Reve was still watching us, its doors waiting to open once again, for someone else. The first light of dawn filtered through the thick trees as we stood in front of Belle Reve one last time. The house was now silent, but we knew the quiet was nothing more than a mask for the horrors hidden deep within. "Maybe we've broken the curse," I said, my voice still trembling slightly. Kate clutched the old journal tightly, nodding slowly. "But there are too many secrets left buried in this place." We climbed onto our motorcycle and left Belle Reve behind, carrying with us memories that would never fade, ghostly apparitions, whispers in the dark, and that chilling presence that followed us with every step we took. But deep down, we both knew this journey was far from over. We had opened a door, and beyond it lay countless unknowns waiting for us. If Belle Reve was where we first learned that spirits linger in our world, then our next journey would lead us to a house deep in the Louisiana swamps, where past and present merge in the shadow of an ancient curse. There, the wind carries whispers, shadows shift among the trees, and an old house harbors deadly secrets. This will be more than a test of courage, it will be a fight for survival. See you in the next episode, where the mysteries deepen and the line between the real world and the unseen grows thinner than ever before.